Hi everyone, this is Nick Pollock here from Roar Lions Roar. While you're here, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that alert bell so you never miss any of our new content. And if you prefer to listen instead of watch, make sure you check us out on your podcast platform of choice where you can subscribe and download each new episode. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Go State!
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Roar Lions Roar. I am your host tonight, Matt Filipovitz, and today we are recapping our Penn State player over-under picks that we did, I think, like the second week of August. And joining me again today, as they did about 5.5 months ago, are my co-hosts, Bill DeFilippo. Bill, hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. Just getting ready to watch Monday Night Raw this evening off of an enthralling Royal Rumble.
Oh, nice. Nick,
Yeah,
will you
I
also
know.
Nick Pollock out there as well. Nick, will you also be watching Royal Rumble tonight or Monday Night Raw, whatever one is on?
I will not. I will be doing house chores and maybe trying to build something.
Nice. Like, define what you mean by build. Like house projects, or what are we talking here?
Yeah, like turning the old media cabinet that I had upstairs into a golf storage space, like for my bag and for shoes and golf balls and tees and all that good stuff. I'm trying to really work my way into being a true homeowner. So this is an important step, building things.
Nice. I'm going to be very unproductive, and I'm probably going to start The Last of Us tonight because I've heard it's phenomenal. So I got to sit down and watch that. But we are not here to talk about what we're doing on this lovely Monday evening. Like I said before, we are going to be recapping, going over, debriefing, whatever term you want to use, our over-under picks from earlier in the year. And I don't see any reason to not just jump right in. So the first over-under that we had was 39.5 sacks for the Penn State defense. Bill, do you remember what you picked for this?
So Matt, you're going to be really disappointed in me, but I
Okay.
actually jotted all of mine down when I took notes when we did this. So I'm looking at what my answer was, and I'm looking at the logic that I gave for why I gave my answer. So if you want to, if you want to have more fun with this, I recommend having Nick start these, unless Nick did the exact same thing as me. Unless you want me to just say what I picked and then give what my logic was heading into
The good news here is that not only do I not remember my picks, I did no research prior to making the picks originally, so I could not have less information available for myself here.
Bill, we'll let you start this one then, and then we'll
Cool.
shift over to Nick, because Nick, I think, is going to have no idea what his answer is
Cool.
in the first place.
That's
So
right.
I picked under, and I picked under for a few reasons. One was that I thought Manny Diaz was going to want to really vary where his pressure was going to be coming from, and I figured that was going to lead to more quarterback pressures, maybe a fewer quarterback sacks. But then I also looked at how many teams from last year and how many teams over the last couple of years reached that 40 sack mark, and it wasn't a lot. It was about 1 in every 10 schools. I then looked at Penn State's roster coming into the season. I said Penn State's 3 best pass rushers were Chop Robinson, Hakeem Beamon, Adisa Isaac, 3 guys who weren't on the team for one reason or another last year. I really only trusted one linebacker as a blitzer in Curtis Jacobs. Of course, Abdul Carter is very good at that. And defensive backs, I didn't know where the blitzing was going to come from. And then my final thing was that Manny Diaz had only hit this mark in 2 of the previous 5 seasons. So I decided based on all of that to take the under, which of course ended up being the wrong pick.
Fair. It was, but it was close. Like, it looked like this was trending towards the under until like the back half of the year. Like, it's funny looking back on it. Like, I took the over in this, admittedly, but I was nervous, especially after Purdue, where Penn State got no sacks against what I thought was going to be a game where they could rack them up against
I don't want to interrupt, but I actually have the breakdown of where Penn State sacks came from in every game this season. Are you ready? Because this is really stupid. Penn State's 42 sacks included 2 against Purdue, 1 against Ohio, 2 against Central Michigan, 1 against Northwestern, 1 against Michigan, 1 against Minnesota, and 2 against Ohio State. That meant that they had 7 against Auburn, and then to end the season, they had 32 sacks in their final 5 games. 6 against Indiana, 7 against Maryland, 4 against Rutgers, 3 against Michigan State, and 6 against Utah. So basically, in the games where you expected Penn State to stat pad early on in the season, they didn't really do that. But then at the end of the season, they decided, okay, this is where we are going to end up padding our stats by just terrorizing Talia Tagovailoa, whomever Indiana threw out there, and then Cameron Rising and his backup.
Yeah, Bill, that breakdown's interesting. I do remember like it felt like the team flipped a switch like after Ohio State, but I didn't realize it was like that insane of a turn. Nick, do you remember what you picked for this?
I'm thinking that I said over because I was anticipating the combination of a more aggressive Manny Diaz defense with improved personnel leading to an over. That's my guess.
Nick, you said under, but I will give you the caveat here, and I want to see if you remember this. You said you would flip it to over if one player got to 3 sacks. Do you remember who that player was?
Daquan Hardy.
It was. Do you know how many sacks Daquan Hardy finished with?
I don't actually remember him getting one this year.
It was 0.5, so you are correct in that regard.
Oh, that's funny.
So what changed it, Nick? Why did this group get to the over, and why did you think it wouldn't happen?
I feel like they got to the over partially because, I think a lot of the credit goes to how good the secondary was. Like when you have Joey Porter Jr. and Kalen King and Daquan Hardy and Johnny Dixon and all those guys just locking down receivers, like there's only so much a offensive line can do to hold off a defensive line, no matter how good blockers are. You just can't hold back defensive linemen that long. So I think the fact that the secondary was just so good at locking dudes up, it just opened up a lot more opportunities for the defensive linemen and blitzing safeties and corners and the linebackers alike. It was, and then of course, the emergence of Abdul Carter as an absolute freak of nature helps too, for sure.
That's the big one. I went back and I listened to this episode like to get all this information, and all of us were like concerned about edge rushers, and justifiably so. Like we were all questioning who would, replace Arnold Ebiketti's production. It turns out it was going to be Abdul Carter and Jair Brown, who were top 2 on the teams in sacks. So edge rushers didn't really produce at that kind of level, but it turns out Penn State doesn't need that to have a successful pass rush. So that was an interesting little tidbit.
And I just ran the numbers and by ran the numbers, I mean, I looked at the page on ESPN and put them into my phone. Abdul Carter, 6.5 sacks, Chop Robinson, 5.5 sacks, Adisa Isaac, 4 sacks, and Denai Dennis Sutton, 3 sacks, 19 sacks from guys who didn't play for Penn State for one reason or another last year. And they were, Carter was first on the team in sacks. Robinson was second. And then Dennis Sutton was tied for 5th. So Penn State was able to get, and this is a really impressive thing. And this is something that makes you really optimistic about next year's team, and then just their ability to fold guys in as long as Manny Diaz is around and hopefully whomever comes after him. But when you're able to get that kind of production from guys who are just getting dropped right into a defense, who didn't spend the last year playing for your team, that is a really good thing. Arnold Ebiketie gave that, and you have that now you now have a proof of concept of guys are able to come to Penn State, or guys, and Isaac is a bit of a different case, but guys are able to come to Penn State and immediately be able to make the kind of big disruptive plays that you want out of guys that are able to just change the complexion of a game altogether, and I was a big fan of it. I am very happy that I was wrong on this one because sacks are cool.
Real quick, Bill, one thing I want to make sure I make note of, because I didn't realize this. So you said it was 19 sacks came from guys who weren't on the roster.
Well, from those guys, I didn't go down and include, I didn't go down and include like
Keon Wiley had half a sack, right? Yeah.
They didn't include stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but interesting though that Chop, Denai Dennis Sutton, and oh my goodness, Abdul Carter all didn't get to campus until I think May was the earliest. Like we made such a big deal about early enrollees. Maybe it's not as big a deal as we thought it was. I'm gonna dig into that, and I'm gonna explore that more this offseason. Maybe that's interesting.
Cool.
All right, though. Moving on. Nick, we're going to start with you, which we will do from here on out, so I won't preface it anymore. The over-under, 1.5 running backs with a 100-yard game. Nick, what do you think you said?
So I remember specifically that I misunderstood this question at first, if I remember correctly, but I'm pretty sure I said over because I said it would be 3. I said,
You did.
I think I specifically said Kevon Lee would get one week 1.
You
and
did.
Then after that, Allen and Singleton would both go over 100 at various points. I seem to remember I've been pretty much the high guy on Katron Allen from the second he committed. But I feel like I was much more emphatic that he maybe, did I maybe say he was going to have more 100-yard games than Singleton? Something like that.
I don't think it was that, but I think you said multiple players will go over 100 yards multiple times, which you were correct on. Singleton went over 100 yards 4 times, while Katron Allen did it twice.
Yeah.
So there you go. But Kevon Lee did make a big impact against Purdue in another regard.
Yeah.
Bill, you, like me, went with the under on this one?
I did, and it was, in my notes here, I said it was because I thought Singleton was just going to grab onto the starting running back job and, take it and establish himself as the best young running back in college football. I think you can argue him and then, gosh, I forget who the freshman was down at Ole Miss, made a case that he is the best young running back in college football. And to that end, got that part of it right. But what I got wrong was that Katron Allen showed that he is right there in terms of being one of the best young running backs in all of college football. And it was something we talked about throughout the season. Allen was just so much better, I felt, and I know you guys felt, at being able to consistently pick up 4, 5, 6 yards and being able to say, plant your foot in the ground, see a hole, plant your foot in the ground, hit it, take what they give you. And he didn't have that, the ability that Singleton had to break a game open with one run. But that's because there are maybe 3, 4 guys in college football who have that ability. So, Katron Allen's really good.
I remember, going back through this, I think I realized how down bad we all were about the Penn State running game. I remember I just wanted one guy to do it one time. I would have been beyond happy with a 100-yard game against Ohio, and that's it. And to now go back and see that it happened, if my math is correct, 6 times in a 13-game season is a clip I did not think possible. So I am very pleased to be wrong on this one. And I didn't think it was going to be Katron Allen, and I'm a lot of credit to him. He ended up actually maybe not out-snapping. He got more carries than Singleton in the end, and both those guys made their money, man. They really earned their way onto the field and earned their way into some pretty impressive honors. So shout out to them. So we'll move on now to the offensive line.
Can I interject and ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
If Kevon Lee doesn't get hurt, do you think this gets to 3?
No.
Okay.
Do you?
The tough part of this for me is that it was clearly the best offensive line that he would have played behind. Clearly the best offensive line he would have played. Yeah, I would say in general, even dating back to 2020. And in 2020, when he was playing behind a pretty solid, an offensive line, I don't want to say pretty solid, but had some good games. He had a 134-yard rushing game where he carried the ball 22 times. He had a 95-yard game against Rutgers. He had an 85-yard game against Illinois. And I don't think he would have, but I think he would have needed to have one game where the coaching staff felt like he's the hot hand, we're going to ride him, and we're going to see what we get out of him. I know you disagree, Matt. Nick, my hunch is you also think he wouldn't have hit the 100-yard mark in any game this year, but I think he would have been close. I think all he would have needed, again, was just one game where they decide they were going to rely on him. Because we saw early in the season, they were really willing to keep him out there and let him be the guy. That final game, the final stretch against Purdue, the game against Northwestern, it seemed like they had a level of trust in him that the younger running backs gained, but it was a little easier for him to get to a point where they would have said, hey, we're just going to keep Kayvon out there.
I think I could have seen him getting 100-yard game later in the year when like at the point when Singleton and Allen were like the only two dudes that could like move at running back, like, and when everyone was hurt, everyone was gone. Like I feel like against like Rutgers or something, they could have maybe let Lee go and see if he got over 100. I don't know how confident I feel in that. What I will say, I do think had he been healthy, I think he would have comfortably led all three of them in receiving yards of the running back group.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fair. Actually, on that note, I don't know if I would say Kayvon Lee could get to a 100-yard game, but if he had stayed the full season, I think Devin Ford would have had a 100-yard receiving game. Like, I think that play he had against Auburn where he caught it out of the flat, I want to say, I think he could have ripped off a big run against like a Central Michigan or something like that and just added like a couple more dink plays to get over 100. I feel pretty good that would have happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. This one, admittedly, this next one was a bad over-under because I said presume no injuries, and then everybody on Penn State's offensive line decided to break their arm at one time. It was really terrible. So I'll open this up to discussion here. So, Bill, the over-under was 6.5 offensive linemen to start a game. Injuries, I said, don't count, but I don't know how we contextualize this. So let's reframe it here. How many offensive line do you think would have played starter reps throughout the course of the season, like assuming everybody stayed healthy? I have the number at 7, so over the 6.5 mark. I personally took the under, so this will be an L for me if we go with that. And those 7 I have are Olu, Landon Tengwall, Juice Scruggs, Salim Wormley, Caden Wallace, Bryce Effner, and Hunter Norzad. Think that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, one of the pleasant surprises of this season for me was that Drew Shelton was able to step in and look like a guy who, he didn't look like a true freshman. There were, of course, some true freshman mistakes at left tackle, but he was able to play and look pretty solid, but that door was only open because of Olu getting hurt. I don't think that would have happened in the event that Olu was healthy. I mean, of course not. Olu could have been a top 5 NFL draft pick this year. So I would say that sounds right to me. I think for this one, give me a second. Yes, I also picked the under, and I said Norzad was going to be the only other guy who I thought going to start.
Yeah. Nick?
I don't remember. I remember being very confused about the question after all the qualifiers we added and then took away. I'm guessing
over, so you're the one who hits on this in the end. You took the over.
Yeah. I feel like for me it was a question mainly surrounding Tengwall and that left guard spot, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, with Norzad competing in camp with him for that one. That seemed to be a holdup for you back then. I will say the big takeaway I think here is that Penn State had 7 dudes on the offensive line that they felt could start. 6 of them are back, and we also learned that Drew Shelton, Vega Iwane, and JB Nelson are also really good. So I think the biggest takeaway that we can take from this question, which admittedly was a poor over under, is that Phil Troutwine should keep his job for a while.
Whoa.
Aren't only 5 of them back with Scruggs moving on?
Oh, you're right. Sorry, you're right. Scruggs has moved on.
Moving on from football. Yeah.
Sorry, you're right. Scruggs has moved on. Yep, sorry. So 4 of this. Wait, 5? Yeah, 5 of this 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, 5. Yeah, 5 of this 7 will be back, which is exciting. Cool. All right, moving on. This one, admittedly, probably set it a bit too low, but 5.5 players to record an interception. Nick, do you remember what you picked?
I think I said over because I think I predicted Wheatley, Jair, Porter, King, Hardy, Dixon. That's 6. I think I predicted at least those 6 would have gotten 1 each.
You did indeed predict the over. So that's something I got to give a lot of credit to you there. So who are you surprised with? I mean, Jair Brown ended up leading the team in picks. Kalen King came in second. And then shockingly, Joey Porter Jr. finished the year with no interceptions. If I told you that
only one career.
August, yeah, which is absolutely insane. If I told you that in August, would you still have taken the over that Joey Porter Jr. would not have recorded an interception this year?
I think so, yes, because I think if you told me that then, I would have assumed that he just wasn't getting thrown at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would have still felt okay about that going over.
Bill, to you, you took the over here as well.
I did, and my logic was that they'd consistently had somewhere between 5 and 7 over the last couple of years. And since 2016, Miami, of course, Manny Diaz's former program, always hit the over. In 2017, they had as many as 9 guys record an interception. So when I'm looking at this, like you mentioned on Porter, him not getting one wasn't a big surprise for me because other than the Purdue game, a game where Purdue really had one idea, and it was to throw the football to Charlie Jones. And,
Chuck Sizzle.
12 receptions, 153 yards, 1 touchdown. In games where Aiden O'Connell played for that first stretch to start the season, that was actually his least productive game. Against Indiana State, he had 9 receptions for 133 yards and 3 touchdowns. Syracuse, 11, 188 and 1. FAU, I think that was the game where O'Connell didn't finish it. So of those 3 games, that was actually somehow the worst game that Charlie Jones played. And Joey Porter Jr. did a really good job of limiting him to, a couple of yards, then we're going to tackle him, that sort of thing. So that doesn't surprise me because Joey Porter Jr. They always hyped him up as the kind of cornerback that you have to throw away from. You cannot throw the football in the vicinity of Joey Porter Jr. Who benefits from that? The cornerback across from him. Kalen King, 3 interceptions. Johnny Dixon, 2 interceptions. Those are the guys on the other side of Joey Porter Jr. Jair Brown, just out there playing that center field role. If you can't throw on Joey Porter Jr. and you're trying to throw the ball downfield, Jair Brown's somewhere to take the football away from you. So I'm not really surprised that Porter ended up having 0. I think I probably would have picked the over even if you told me that, because they just built up a secondary where, okay, you don't want to throw at one guy, you have to throw at one of these other guys. And that's one of the things that has me so excited heading into the next year where, okay, you're not going to throw the football at Kalen King. Good luck throwing on Johnny Dixon, on Storm Duck, on Daquan Hardy, who's backing it. Just all of these guys who are able to break up and intercept passes in Penn State's secondary.
RIP to the Charlie Jones versus Iowa offense tracker.
That's right.
That was phenomenal content. Real quick, Nick, I'm going to give you credit as much as it kills me. You specifically called out having some random defensive lineman get a pick because Lucetta did it last year. And you were right. Do you remember who had the pick from Penn State's defensive line this year?
Was it? Did Beeman get one?
Beeman did not get one.
Younger.
Zane didn't get one.
Zane did
right
not get
class,
one.
but no.
Yep.
Oh boy. Denai didn't get one, did he?
Yes, he did.
Denai did get one. On like an engage 8 against Indiana's backup quarterback, where Sutherland batted the ball in the air, and it could not have landed more in DDS's hands. So I got to give you credit there. I forgot about that Lucetta play when I made this question, and that was a good call out by you.
I mean, there's almost I mean, you had the Lucetta play. I mean, Anthony Zettel, I think it had at least 2 interceptions in his career. Like it just happens. It's college football. Those things happen.
Zettel had one. Nassib, I remember, had one against Buffalo. DDS had one. Lucetta had one. There's been like a really weird list of like Penn State defensive linemen routinely like stumbling their way into interceptions. It's been a fun trend, and I hope Hakeem Beeman gets one this year. That would be cool. But speaking of cool things, gentlemen, let me tell you about Home Field Apparel. Home Field Apparel is our official sponsor. They make some of the coolest, coziest, most comfortable gear on the college sports internet right now. They got hoodies, they got crew necks, they've got weird joggers with the UConn logo on it. They have t-shirts, which I know you all own. Is anybody rocking their Home Field Apparel gear right now?
Not right now.
No, I'm wearing the shirt that they put in McClanahan's when College Game Day came for Michigan in 2017. Yeah.
Nice. Fun. I am wearing my old blog, Tutty's hoodie. So, but that does not mean I will not be wearing Home Field Apparel this week. I have a trip planned in a couple weeks, and I've already prepared my home field gear to come along with me as I explore Savannah and Charleston in February. But our listeners can get 15% their first order from Home Field Apparel. doesn't have to be Penn State. Just make sure you use the promo code Roar Lions Roar. I have Louisville gear. I have Tulane gear. I have UConn gear. I have a UC Irvine Zot sweatshirt that I really like. All kinds of different colleges out there. They make really great stuff. They're our podcast's oldest partner in the sense that they sponsored us since our relaunch last year. But again, they make great stuff. We love working with them. And our listeners get 15% off of their first order with promo code Roar Lions Roar, all one word, all caps at checkout. So thank you to Homefield for letting us talk over-unders and, recapping our weird brains that we had to formulate thoughts with going back to August. And this is the question that I am most excited to talk about. Over under 1.5 games played for Drew Aller. And in my notes here, I wrote, LOL, we recorded this the day before he was announced as the backup. We looked like idiots. LOL again.
I was so if I can go first on this one, just because I want to read what my exact note was.
Okay, hit me.
Under. CV gets the first chance at backup reps in games, namely in OOC. Aller maybe gets the final possession or two in one of those. To which I then say, we really should have just waited another day to record this because I would have said something different.
I feel like I said over.
Nick, you said under.
Oh, damn.
Which, again, was totally justified.
The funny thing is, if only you changed the name to Bo Prabula, this would have been just very different.
That's true. It would have been very different. I took the over here. I will shut up because the second we start talking about Drew Aller, I will go into an absolute monologue, and we don't need that. But I was correct, and I remember when Aller came in against Purdue, I added both of you in the Slack, and I said it was free money. But also credit to Christian Veillere. Do you know how many games Christian Veillere got in this year?
Was it 2?
It was 2. So this also would have hit. So that I will align that with our logic that we had at the time that the third string got into 2 games. So that was cool. Any thoughts? Were you surprised that Aller was the primary backup all the way going back to week 1? Like, I think it was clear that he had kind of taken control after the non-con, but were you surprised that Franklin actually trotted him out there going back to Purdue?
I mean, I don't think he had a choice in the Purdue situation, right? And I think what we heard rumblings that initially it was because of an injury to Veillere, right? That initially Aller was getting those reps as the 2. But when you have the talent that Drew Aller has, it's the kind of thing where if you give him the backup job, he's probably not going to give it back. So I wasn't surprised that he didn't lose it, and I wasn't once he had that backup job, really nailed down. I wasn't surprised at all at any point during the season about his usage. It's very clear that he is, and always has been since he committed and signed, that he is going to be the guy in the future. So it makes perfect sense that they did as much as they could to get him as many actual game reps as they could. So I wasn't terribly surprised here.
Yeah, the one thing that I will say surprised me is like Nick mentioned, you still don't know if Christian Veillere was actually hurt or sick or whatever, and that's why Aller took the job from him. But just because he takes the job doesn't mean it has to stay his job. And I think he did an excellent job all season taking advantage of the opportunities that were given to him. You don't necessarily have to do that. You don't necessarily have to do that if you're a young quarterback. You can go out there and look completely lost, and nobody will blame you. Absolutely no one will blame you if you go out there and look terrible. And my proof for this is the one guy in the recruiting class who was ranked higher than him, I believe by 24/7. Oh, wait, no, the number 2 quarterback in the class by 24/7, Cade Klubnik, down at Clemson. I think Dabo Swinney put on a masterclass in how to just not put your quarterback in a position to succeed by throwing Cade Klubnik out there against Notre Dame for one pass, which I believe was either an interception or a pick six. He goes out, he beats up on a terrible North Carolina team in the ACC championship game, goes out against Tennessee in the Orange Bowl and looked awful. The dude just looked absolutely
He looked bad.
He looked like a true freshman. And I think it's a testament to James Franklin, to Mike Yurcich, to Sean Clifford, to whatever extent you want to talk about his mentorship here, but most importantly, Drew Aller, that I didn't think Aller ever looked like a killer or anything. I thought he looked like a talented but flawed kid. But at the end of the day, at no point did he go out there and look completely lost. At no point was he put into a position, unless you want to say against Michigan, probably not, where he could fail and it could be a problem. And for that reason, again, all credit to Drew Aller for making the most of those opportunities. All credit to Penn State's coaching staff for making the best of it. And of course, the big issue here is that we did not wait one more goddamn day to record that podcast when the answers would have been very different.
Sometimes it's all about timing. Sometimes that's all it takes. All right, well, keep it in the quarterback room. And the over-under we had for Sean Clifford passing touchdowns was 24.5. Nick, do you remember what you picked?
I think I said over.
You said under, and that hits because Cliff threw exactly 24.
I'm wondering if I was predicting a resurgent run game, and that's partially why I said that. Okay, yeah.
Yep, yeah. You picked. You said they were going to punch it in on the goal line a lot, which you ended up being right. That T formation really pushed us here.
Katron Allen, baby.
I also had the under here, and I said the under by a smidge, which I will call the half a touchdown that we hit this by. Bill, you went with the over. Were you surprised that this one did not hit?
I would say yes. I thought this was, and I think we'd probably all agree on it, I thought this was the best year that Sean Clifford had as Penn State starting quarterback. My logic that I wrote down was that there were going to be improvements in Sean Clifford's game this year. And I would say we got that. He actually set his career high in touchdowns passes this year with 24. His previous career high was in 2019 with 23. So he managed to just middle this thing so that he got a career high, but it wasn't the total that you set it as. I'm actually fascinated in Clifford's year this year because Penn State played 13 games this year. Penn State, of course, played 9 games in 2020. And Clifford only threw 100 more passes than he did in 5 more games than he did in 2020. Last year, he threw the ball 428 times compared to the 351 he threw this year. All of this is to say the reason that Clifford did not hit that number, and you could also make the case the reason that his completion percentage was as high as it was at any point in his career, his passer rating was as high as it ever was in his career. I don't have his QBR year by year, but I'm guessing his QBR was the highest it's ever been this year. Was because of Penn State's running game, because Penn State was never really in situations where Sean Clifford had to go out and throw them to a win. And that was bad for the total on touchdown passes by Clifford. It was really good for the team, both presently because of what it meant for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen being able to get snaps, and the future because Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are now battle-tested running backs heading into their sophomore season.
I'll give you another benefit of the doubt here, Bill, is that we saw a really a fundamental change in how Franklin handled backups. I think he pulled Clifford early in a lot of games. I think if Clifford stays in for maybe 4 more drives total this season, this one hits. I think
I don't know if he manages the backup the same way though. If the backup was, or just like a fellow senior, like somebody else that's not going to be starting next year.
Because what did they? So Matt, you and I have had this conversation with a group of our friends. We've all yelled at you because that's not how he handles other backups. He handles backups at defensive line, at linebacker, at wide receiver, at running back, very differently from how he handles backups at quarterback. And that has always been James Franklin's thing. And James Franklin has always been We're having our quarterbacks stay out there. Once we take out the entire offense, we are putting the entire new offense in, and that means an entire new quarterback. And the difference this year, and this was something that Franklin talked about, this is something that drove a lot of fans insane, was he wanted to try and balance getting the backup quarterback, of course, Drew Aller, reps where he is. One, the game is in a place where you feel comfortable putting your backup quarterback in. But two, the game is in a place where you feel comfortable putting your backup quarterback in and you're not concerned about getting everybody else out. They wanted him to get reps with the ones. And that was how things were a little bit. Only one quarterback got reps with the runs this season. That was in the Purdue game. But that was just how things were different for Drew Aller this season. And again, it goes to how this quarterback room was managed and how it ended up, probably hurting Sean Clifford's raw numbers a little bit. I mean, he was 188 yards away from having 3,000 passing yards. He set his career touchdown record, his personal touchdown record, but, he could have easily gotten to 27, 28 and made his numbers look a little bit nicer this year. But instead, they decided they wanted to give Drew Aller a chance to get out there with Singleton, with Allen, with the first team offensive line, with the first team wide receivers, and get a little bit of experience with guys of that caliber, as opposed to, God bless Tank Smith, but throwing wheel routes to Tank Smith when he was out there.
Would have been cool to hit Tank Smith on a wheel route. That would have been great. All right, we'll move on to the over-under that Bill, I believe your exact term was that I was a maniac for this number, and it turns out Bill was right, because this was nowhere close. So the over-under was 3.5 players with at least 40 catches, and in my notes, I have LOL, 2 got there, what was I thinking? So, Bill, do you want to take your victory lap here?
I don't really care enough to take a victory lap.
The victory lap was taken when we originally recorded this.
This is true.
So the logic that I had, Penn State has had this once since the 2016 season, and it was in 2017 when 4 guys are currently in the NFL: Mike Gesicki, Saquon Barkley, Jawan Johnson, and Deshaun Hamilton were their pass catchers. Yurcich had this one time at Oklahoma State, and that was back in 2017. Ohio State has not had this a single time over the last 5 seasons. Alabama had it once over the last 5 seasons. So I basically thought, my logic was, in order to do that, it was really, really hard. It was incredibly difficult to get the ball out to that many dudes, even before you account for a better running game. And, that ended up happening. And one could make the argument, if either of you would like to do this, that the wide receiver room disappointed a bit this season. And that was part of the reason why the numbers weren't a bit gaudier, even at the very top, where Mitchell Tinsley, 51 receptions for 577 yards and 5 touchdowns. Parker Washington, 46, 611 and 2. But I think just generally, that's a really fundamentally difficult thing to have to do.
Yeah, I mean, yes. I think to your point about the wide receiver room in general being having a down year, I would agree. But it's also, like you said, it's hard to really parse it out. Like I do think that they were not terribly great at finding creative ways to get open. Like, I don't know if this was their best year route running. But kind of the shadow over all of these predictions, I know for myself, was that I thought the running game would improve, and the running game improved by leaps and bounds. So, it's when you're analyzing receiver production, like on a quantitative basis, when we're talking totals, how do you really analyze that when you're putting it up against an improved run game, because the two are in a symbiotic relationship? So, we probably should have leaned harder into more like rate stats when making over-unders like this. But I
had the under here. I want that out there in the zeitgeist. But I thought they would come close, because I thought Jahan caught like 90 something balls in 2021, and he's the first round pick at receiver this program has had in like 25 years. Like that's a very special talent. So I thought it would take two guys to replace that. And I was kind of right. I mean, Tinsley and Washington about totaled that number. Then I thought that, Theo Johnson would emerge. He missed some time. Brenton Strange emerged instead. They kind of ate into each other. Strange finished with 32 catches. And then I thought a running back would really come on. I thought the screen game would be really more involved than it ended up being. And that's where I got to about that over-under number. And it turns out I was nowhere close because, again, only 3 guys got to 30. So just I'm curious to see how this, if I set this next year, we do this activity next year, if I put this at 2.5, where are you guys leaning?
Probably under.
I'm not sure. I will say this. You mentioned Dotson leaving and how that impacted things for Penn State. Someone's got to catch the football. Penn State last year, of course, the year Jahan Dotson caught 91 passes, 291 completions. This year, 270. So guys were still out there catching the football. Penn State basically had the same number of completions, albeit in 64 fewer attempts. They ran the ball 437 times last year. They ran it 489 times this year. So they did run it a bit more. But in terms of completing passes to guys, it's not like they were out here. It's not like they completely went away from throwing the football. You allocate those 21 passes out, and you still, even if you give half of them, you give as many as to Brenton Strange as he needs. That gets him 8, would have gotten him to 40. That means there would have been 13 left over for Keandre Lambert-Smith. That only would have gotten him to 37. So Penn State's thing was it got the ball to more guys this season, but it still completed, about the same number of passes, albeit on a whole lot fewer attempts.
I never would have thought to even look up that stat. That's interesting. I wonder what that's going to parlay into as they need pass catchers desperately in the new season. But one thing they don't need in the new season are running backs. And I got to give you two credit here. This last one, or second last one, I guess. So 650.5 rushing yards for Penn State's leading rusher. I had the under here. And in my notes, I put, this is the first time I've ever thought conservatively about Penn State football in the month of August. I'm always Mr. Optimism, and I really was down bad about their running game. Nick, you had the over here. Take a victory lap. Both guys, Singleton and Allen, got over this mark.
Yeah, first of all, I am the true optimistic force here, so you gotta get on my level first for that. But
fair,
yeah, I think I actually specifically said that both Singleton and Allen would get over this. Like we've said time and time again. I thought he looked a lot better this year in the limited time we saw him, but I was not a fan of the way that Kevon Lee ran the football while at Penn State. And I thought that with improved rushing technique and with what we thought was going to be an improved offensive line, I didn't think it was a stretch for Penn State to, turn back into a functional rushing team. And we have seen them under James Franklin. When they can run the football effectively, they're gonna run the football. So yeah, this was a pretty easy one for me. What I remember, I do remember this one. I wasn't conflicted on.
Bill, over to you. You also had the over here.
My note here was over, comma, big Singleton guy, exclamation point. And I can very confidently and proudly and optimistically say I've not wavered on that. I still think Nick Singleton is pretty good, but I think even I would say the most optimistic Katron Allen person, so Nick, would probably admit coming into this season, if I said to him, Nick Singleton is going to run for over 1,000 yards this season, that probably would have meant Katron Allen wasn't going to hit this. It would have been very difficult for him to hit this. And I think it is quite the testament to Katron Allen and how Penn State just used its running backs in general, that Singleton was able to get above the 1,000-yard mark. Just such kind of a hollowed mark for a running back. Singleton had 1,061 rushing yards as a true freshman. Saquon Barkley had 1,076. You go back to the 2015 season, Saquon's first year on campus, he ran for 1,076 yards. Their next leading rusher was Akil Lynch with 282. So, again,
oh my God,
a real testament to how they literally could not have kept Katron Allen on the sideline, even with how good Singleton was as a football player.
I'm curious to see how they handle things moving forward. I think they want a third guy. I think they need a third guy. Like, the problem is they don't have a third guy. Like, London Montgomery's not going to be ready. I forget the player from Georgia.
Cam Wallace can fly, baby.
The thing is, you're one ankle moving in the wrong direction away from being down to one running back. If one running back and a bunch of walk-ons. So yeah, just generally, I'm interested in your guys' thoughts on this. If they were to get a running back in the transfer portal who could, I'm not even sitting here and saying I want them to go out and get another Nick Singleton or Katron Allen, because that guy doesn't exist. If there is any position on the offense now that they have kind of figured out what they have at wide receiver, where they can go portal shopping, I want it to be running back. But I'm interested in hearing what you guys think, just because I want them to have that little bit of insurance in case, Singleton plants his foot wrong, and next thing you know, he's out for the next month.
Yeah.
Can I pull a name? Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
Ooh, no, please pull your name.
Can I pull a name from the depths of Penn State football history?
Please.
There's no Kevin Rayner for running backs. Like, there's not that guy who's gonna come. That's a really deep cut for Nick.
There's not a guy that everyone in the fan base is going to be really annoying about, even though when he plays, there's a reason why he's a backup.
Right. Like, there's not going to be that depth piece who just loves Penn State and wants to be like his family and play for Penn State. Like, that just doesn't exist. I don't know how you're going to find this option. Like, maybe you can find a JUCO guy who has the COVID year and convince him to come in. Or maybe there's just some guy at an FCS school who, knows he's done playing football and wants to give it a go, with the big boys. But I can't bank on that. It'd be cool if they can get one, but realistically, I just don't think that player exists right now.
I think it's probably it's probably unlikely that they'll find anyone that you have even momentarily heard of. What I do think they can use to their advantage if they do, and because I agree, I do think they should look for somebody in the portal because depth is a good thing and building depth is important. I do think one thing to their advantage if they go portal shopping for a receiver is they can specifically look for somebody to fill more of that pass catching back role, because we saw Katron Allen do it a bit, and I thought he looked pretty good catching the football, pretty natural. Singleton had some struggles in the receiving game, I think, but I don't think that James Franklin and Mike Yurcich would at all be against having another guy, even if it's primarily a third and long type back, where maybe sometimes they're there catching a screen pass, most of the time they're just out there to block. I don't think they would be against finding somebody to, take some of those hits and not have to, keep those on Allen and Singleton's plate, because, you want to create, you want to build total running backs with complete skill sets, but it's that's not their main value. So if you can avoid giving them those reps that aren't really going to change their personal outcomes or the team outcome, it's worth exploring.
So what I'm hearing is Tony Rojas as Penn State's weird version of Miles Jack at UCLA from a decade ago.
Give me King Doru. I think he entered the portal from Purdue.
Sure.
Oh, okay. All right. We can work with that. But all right, gents, the last one, and this one similar to offensive line. We'll have to break it down here in real time. So the over/under was 59% of snaps with 5 defensive backs on the field. So basically, the theory was they would be a primary nickel defense. What do you feel like this was? I have total snaps broken out by position. So linebackers are on the field for 2,563 snaps, corners for 2,126, corners for 1,992. I don't know how we want to break that down. Bill, we'll start with you. What did you think Penn State's base defense was?
I think its base defense was 4 down linemen, 3 linebackers, and 4 defensive backs. I mean, I don't think. I think they deviated away from that on passing downs, but they really wanted to have that linebacking trio of Jonathan Sutherland, of Tyler Elsdon, and Curtis Jacobs out there. And then they changed things up situationally. I believe when we did the pod earlier in the year, I said it's just so tough to quantify. It's so situational. So I took the under on that. And because we don't have a specific answer, I'm saying I was right.
Nick, do you remember what you said? And then do you want to tailor your answer based upon that?
I think I may have said over, and I think it was probably fueled by Jonathan Sutherland seems like a really good dude, and I'm glad he was at Penn State. It just wasn't, necessarily the greatest football player. I'm guessing that I probably said over because I thought they would want to limit the amount of reps for Sutherland, or maybe not limit, but be very choosy about what they asked him to do from that role. And I would bet that over the first maybe half of the season, they maybe did do more out of the nickel defense than with 3 linebackers. But I'm wondering if then that shifted around halfway through the year when they moved Jacobs back to the Sam role and gave Carter more time at the will with Kobe King or Elsdon between them, because I think that is when they were at their best, when they had both Jacobs and Carter on the field. I like Bill said, they typically, when they're in third down, they're almost always 2 linebackers, 5 DBs. But I do think, I feel like there was at least a little bit of a shift towards more 3 linebacker sets as the season went on, mostly thanks to Carter's emergence, and then Jacobs just like rediscovering what makes him awesome when he moved back to the Sam.
Yeah. All right, Nick. So I'll put you down here as calling this an under. That ended up being an under then. I think that's fair. It did feel like, that's a really good point you made, Nick, where it felt like it was a lot of 5 defensive back sets early on. I think a lot of that is because, one, Purdue, and then from there, they blew out the next 3 opponents. They killed Ohio, they killed Auburn, they killed Central Michigan. Northwestern was just the worst game I've ever watched in my life, and that's saying something. So yeah, I guess it ended up being pretty hard to quantify. So we'll call it under here. So Bill gets the win here. And gentlemen, it was a close race, but Nick, you come out on top by correctly predicting the most over-unders here. Nick, how do you feel after winning this very high stakes matchup?
Yeah, I'd like to thank my family. I'd like to thank my dog sleeping here. I'd like to thank Daquan Hardy and Katron Allen and all my other favorites. Yeah, I don't know. I think as a whole we did quite well as a group here with these.
Yeah, I think overall we did pretty good.
Did you finish above me, Matt, or did I come in third here?
You finished with 4 correct. I finished with 5 correct, and then Nick finished with 6 correct. Okay. So the Drew Aller thing is what pushed me over.
Okay. So I've won every time we've done this except for 5 since 1967. I'm sorry. Okay. Can I go on a quick rant?
Yeah.
Hit me.
James Franklin.
Lean into it, cowards.
James Franklin. If you listen to our podcast, I don't know why. But thank you for doing that. Anyone who has James Franklin's ear.
5 stars on Apple Podcasts and nice comments.
Yes, 5-star review on Apple Podcast or any other podcast platform you use.
If anyone is James Franklin or has James Franklin's ear, I want you to tell him this. I understand how cumbersome and embarrassing that graphic was when it first came out. I completely get it. Having said that, it has been this is the third Super Bowl since that graphic came out. It's still accurate. Please embrace how funny it is. Like, just laugh. Just think for 2 seconds about this graphic and how hard you have to work in order to make the big letters make sense by putting those cumbersome small letters below it. That is so funny. If you do not know what we mean, God bless. Just Google Penn State except for 5 since 1967. Please, James Franklin, become cool with that. Have that tweeted out every single year that Penn State has someone in the Super Bowl. And if Penn State doesn't, just bad Photoshop, cross out the 5 and write 6. Just something like that. Let's just have some fun with this thing. It's very funny. And who doesn't love someone who's able to laugh at themselves?
And when you continue to be annoyed by it, then you open yourself up to the thing that Arkansas did after the bowl last year when they remade the graphic with Arkansas stuff and whatever it was. I don't even remember what bowl it was at this point, but
Outback.
Yeah, just lean into it. Have fun.
Even if you just tweet out a graphic that says a Penn Stater has appeared in every Super Bowl, and then the caption is except 5 since 1967, that would kill on socials.
It would
absolutely.
It would dominate.
It would be so funny, dude.
It would. So there's been a lot of mishaps of like really, really. We love the Penn State athletic department here on this podcast. If we ever ask for media credentials, don't take them away, please. But there was one they had that Jason Kirk wrote about for SB Nation back in 2016. And do you guys remember what this one would have been? Like, what would have been controversial back then?
No, I don't. SB Nation, was that a website?
In what year?
In 2016, Bill, in May of 2016, Nick, allegedly it was a website.
Interesting.
May of 26. I can't think of what this would have been.
It would have been, they put out a big graphic, and the very top of it, it just says no talent required.
I know. Yes. Yeah, because they were doing the thing where it was like, listen, you come here, you grind, you work hard, and great things will happen. And instead, it came off as like, yeah, if you suck, Penn State's the place for you. Of course, it then had the context of people weren't happy with James Franklin by that point because it hadn't been the 2016 season. Yes, I remember that. That's right.
All right, so there's on top of no talent required, there are requirements that allegedly you have to have had. So I'll read them off now. One of them was energy. Another was effort. Doing extra was one of them. Attitude, naturally. Being prepared. Body language. Work ethic. Being coachable. And being on time were all required, but talent was not, according to Penn State recruiting in 2016.
Listen, being a college football player is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated. Sorry.
Is this how we get a YouTube strike? For copyright?
No. We're fine.
All right. Let's get out of here before we actually get ourselves a YouTube strike. Bill, anything to send our listeners off into their week with?
No. Have a nice week, friends.
Nick, to you.
Remember, if you need betting advice, come to me.
Why? Did something happen?
I won.
Oh, on this. Oh, I thought there was something
happened?
like I thought there was something like the NFL that I didn't know about.
No, don't ask me about the NFL bets I placed this week. Just assume they all won.
Well, according to Twitter, the NFL was rigged because everybody's out to steal your money, and that money should instead be going to Home Field Apparel, 15% off your first order with promo code Roar Lions Roar.
Well done.
Thank you, as always, for listening to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. Be sure to follow us on Twitter over at RLR Blog. It's a big week for Penn State basketball. They're going on the road to face number 1 Purdue. If they win that, I will go live on Twitter Spaces. Maybe, I don't know, that's trivia night, so who's to say? Be sure to leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. Leave us a comment if you're on YouTube. Be cool. Leave cool comments. Ask us fun questions. We'll answer them either in the comments or in a future episode. And yeah, for my co-host, Bill DeFilippo, for my co-host, Nick Polak, I am Matt Filipovitz. Go State.
Go State. Go Leeds.